Earlier this morning, Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman, a longtime lobbyist and influence peddler here in Washington, D.C., entering into a plea agreement, pleading guilty and entering into a guilty plea and an agreement to cooperate with the special counsel, Robert Mueller. That is the most interesting part here. Paul Manafort not only pleading guilty to charges, could face up to 10 years in prison, but he will not be sentenced for now, as he promises to cooperate with Robert Mueller and with the broader Justice Department into ongoing investigations. Exactly what, we don't quite know just yet. I'm joined here in studio by CNN Shimon Prokopez, CNN Sarah Murray, and our legal analyst Michael Zeldin. A dramatic day, hard to overstate the significance in the special counsel investigation, in the sense that Manafort had held out. He said he was innocent. First, he was convicted in Virginia. He was about to stand trial on a separate set of charges here in D.C. After the proceedings this morning, his attorney came out and issued a brief statement to reporters explaining why Mr. Manafort decided now, on the eve of trial number 2, to cut a deal.
Tough day for Mr. Manafort, but he's accepted responsibility, and he wanted to make sure that his family was able to remain safe and live a good life. He's accepted responsibility, and this is for conduct that dates back many years, and everybody should remember that. So thank you, everyone.
Two significant pieces to me, and please jump in if you find others in what Mr. Downing just said there. Number one, voicing publicly a concern that Mr. Manafort not only wanted his family to be able to live a good life, a financial question there, does he keep some resources even as he has to forfeit assets to pay back the government, but to be safe. To be safe, and then the second part, saying everyone should remember this is conduct that goes back many years. Is that a message to the President of the United States, saying Mr. Manafort has pled guilty to things that predate the Trump campaign?
Yeah, certainly. I'm with you on this, John. I think the part about safety, you don't often hear when people cooperate that their lawyers start talking about their safety. So we don't know exactly. Something's going on here, and perhaps maybe that was a part of the plea agreement here, that the government was going to offer him and his family some kind of protection. We know that, Paul Manafort has dealt with a lot of shady characters for a very long time, and that could be what his concern is. The concern could be that they may think that he's...
let's put it on the table, including Russian oligarchs close to Vladimir Putin, who has a history of punishing his critics.
That's exactly right.
Overseas.
And that was a concern. Certainly some folks that I've talked to always felt that the reason why Manafort didn't want to cooperate was because he was afraid for his family and for his safety. There could be something here going on where perhaps the special counsel and the government has offered him some sort of safety. The other thing is the continuous cooperation that they're now going to get, not just in the Mueller investigation. This is at the Justice Department, so there could be other matters. As we know, Robert Mueller has sent cases to the Southern District of New York, to the U.S. Attorney here in Virginia. So he could be cooperating in those cases. This is true. This does really go back many years.
Cases that involve, there are investigations for years about Russian oligarchs and their business dealings here. There are other lobbying firms tied up in this allegation. Manafort has now pleaded guilty to, that he was essentially illegally hiding money from the government because he was doing foreign lobbying and not disclosing it as such. And then the Trump Organization CFO is cooperating with the Southern District of New York. Michael Cohen is cooperating. So if you're the President of the United States today and you are sitting in the West Wing, and yes, your public statement and a factual statement is, none of this has anything to do with my campaign, but the big but is you also know that there are a half dozen or more other investigations going on about people around you and your organization, including your family.
Well, sure, and nothing has to do with his campaign until it does. I mean, that's obviously what we saw in the situation of Michael Cohen, where there were lots of concerns about, his various business dealings, and then he went out and essentially implicated the president in these campaign payments. And so we just don't know what it is that Paul Manafort knows, what it is that he could offer information on. He's close with Roger Stone. He could have information on Roger Stone. He could have information about that infamous, Trump Tower meeting between Paul Manafort, Don Jr., Jared Kushner, and the Russians. But he could also, as Shimon points out, and I think as Kevin Downing was pointing out there, have years of information about how these oligarchs who are connected to Russian President Vladimir Putin, how they have exerted influence in the U.S. under the radar. And that is obviously very valuable to law enforcement as well.
Right. That sentence, this has nothing to do with the White House, I think needs a comma and then the word yet. Because we have yet to know what this really is going to mean for them or others like the oligarchs who have financial dealings in the United States that are untethered to the president, that he may be providing important information on.
That's critical. This opens up a whole new chapter in an investigation that's not ending anytime soon. Paul Manafort, who's been hostile witness, refusing to cooperate with prosecutors, now saying he will cooperate outside the presence of his attorneys. So if you thought the Mueller investigation was ending soon, if you thought these other investigations might wind down, this big development today suggests dramatically that is not the case.